Do you want to know how to spot a weak man? Do you want to be sure that you are never seen that way? Well, after 40 years of life, 20 years of business, 10 years of church work, and after counseling countless men over the years on their lives, I can tell you for sure that the most common trait and easily identifiable trait of a weak man is an out-of-order marriage. Now, what is an out-of-order marriage? An out-of-order marriage is any marriage relationship that functions in an order outside of God's original design. Yes, God has a designed order. Surprise, surprise, the way that God created the earth is the way He intended it to function. And the way He created man and mankind, and the order in which He created it, was His intended design for its function for the rest of time. But humans tend to operate outside of the will of God. We have free will, and we've got sin buried deep inside of us. And so we tend to get out of order on a regular basis. But throughout Scripture, God makes it really clear what the order or intended order of a marriage relationship should be. Let's look at the very beginning, the creation order, right? The creation order in Genesis 2:18 through 24 talks about how Eve was created in order to be a helpmate and a companion for Adam. When God originally created the earth and the Garden of Eden where He placed Adam, Adam was given a job. Adam was told, take care of the garden, name the animals, care for them, tend this place. And after a while, God noticed Adam is not happy. He needs relationship. He's got all these animals and plants around, but he needs another human to interact with. And so God created Eve to be a helper and a companion on Adam's mission. God gave Adam a mission, He gave him a vision, He gave him clear instructions, and Adam was going about doing that job, but he needed a helper and a companion for it. So from our very creation, God is making it clear what the intended order is in order to make us happy, healthy, whole, productive reflections of Him in the earth. And that's just our creation order. What about our design? About, men versus women. This is a big debate these days. At least I think the internet is trying to create a big debate out of it. Most people with any common sense and sanity know what the truth is, but this whole, what is a woman? What is a man? Men can be women. Women don't need men. All of that stuff, it's a big topic right now, but it's pretty easily identifiable what our roles are supposed to be in our relationship simply from our biological design. Men have high levels of testosterone. We build muscle a lot faster. We're much more aggressive. Fasting doesn't harm us, so we can go for days without food while we go and hunt and fight and go do what we need to do. Whereas women, on the other hand, if they skip meals for a few days, their hormones are all over the place. They're not intended to do that. Women, on average, are much smaller than men. They're much less muscular than men. They're much less athletic than men. They're much less coordinated than men, on average. And by the way, this conversation's not meant to insult women at all. It's to point to our differences that are meant to complement one another because of God's design. And in all reality, an out-of-order relationship, I'm not pointing a finger or putting blame on the woman in the situation. I'm putting the blame and responsibility on men because they were designed to be the leaders from the very get-go. So not only our creation order reflects the order of God in our marriage, but our design as men and women shows that men are meant to be the aggressor, they're meant to be the leader, they are meant to go create, conquer, take territory, and women are typically more nurturing, they're typically more suited for the home, they're typically more suited for being a helpmate to a man and his vision. And that's just the reality of it. I'm not the one who makes the rules, I'm just the one who identifies the rules and the order through God's Word. Now, what about covenantal headship? The relationship between men and women and what the leadership is supposed to look like within the covenant of marriage. In Romans 5, verses 12 through 19, and 1 Corinthians 15, 21 and 22, Adam is portrayed as the covenantal head of humanity. In other words, God is referring to Adam as the beginning of all humanity. Sin and death entered the world. The scripture says this, that sin and death entered the world through Adam's disobedience in the Garden of Eden, even though Eve was the first one to eat the fruit from the forbidden tree. This shows that Adam bears primary responsibility for the fall of mankind, even though he wasn't the one who took the first step, because he is the responsible party. Oftentimes, and you may have heard it before as well, I'd be surprised if you haven't, but Fault always falls on leadership. It doesn't matter where the mistake was made. You got an employee that screws up. Your client doesn't go and complain to your employee. They go and complain to you if you're the owner. That's the authority. That's the order. As the leader, you are primarily responsible for your company's results. Whether or not it was an assistant doesn't really matter, but it reflects you as the owner. You are the leader. That is God's design. It's how it works. What about accountability for the fall, right? Eve ate the fruit from the forbidden tree before Adam even touched it. Yet, God called out Adam first. Remember when God showed up in the Garden of Eden after Adam and Eve had eaten the fruit from the forbidden tree and they're hiding from God? God didn't walk around the garden asking for Eve. He asked for Adam. Why? He's the leader. He's accountable. And Adam hid because he knew he was accountable and the leader. And then finally, the scripture talks often about the husband's role, specifically in Ephesians 5:23 through 25. It discusses the husband's role as the head of the wife, comparing it to Christ's headship over the church, showing and laying out that men are supposed to love and protect and serve their wives as God loved, or as Christ loved and sacrificed himself for his bride, the church, us believers. And so even our function as men is clearly laid out that we are supposed to be the leaders, we're supposed to be accountable, we are supposed to have vision, we're supposed to be the ones responsible for everything within a marriage. Now, out of order, we just want to talk about what out of order means. Out of order, if you think about it, anything that is not in order is out of order. Anything that is out of order means chaos. That's what it means. Anything that is out of order is chaotic. It doesn't matter if it's traffic, if it's people on a sidewalk, if it's, you name it. Anything that is out of order is always chaos. When you don't follow order, there is confusion. And that's what happens within a marriage relationship when the marriage is out of order, when it's outside of God's original design. Now, here are some examples of an out of order marriage, and maybe some quick fire signs for you to be able to identify when you're looking at a man in his life. Number one is just a reversal of roles, and that's a theme that carries all the way through. A reversal of roles, think about it. Here's the order: man, woman. Out of order goes woman, man. It's a role reversal. And this points back to what I said earlier about responsibility for this. I'm not going to point the finger at women and say, it's your fault you're out of order. There may be some women that are out of order. I've seen plenty of them who are out of order in their relationships, that are operating in a role that doesn't belong to them, that are acting as the man in the relationship. But do you know why that's happening? It's happening because a man has abdicated his role as the leader, as the protector, as the provider, as the visionary. He stepped off the throne. He has abdicated his responsibility and left that throne empty, so someone has to sit on it. If he's not going to sit on it, someone needs to. And so anyone who would see a throne sitting empty and realizing someone needs to sit on it, well, he's not going to. I'm going to jump on it. It always ends up in role reversal. It always ends up with a man submitting his authority or surrendering his authority, surrendering his place, surrendering his calling, surrendering his leadership to someone else. And that someone else ends up being his wife. It's a role reversal. And that ends up oftentimes a wife disrespecting and belittling her husband. It's another huge sign. A wife who is mouthy and aggressive like a man. A wife who orders her husband around. A man who fears his wife and either won't stand up to her or hides entirely. Guys, I have seen so many of these throughout my life. It's freaking crazy. And every time I've seen it, if you actually go back to the first video that I ever released on this platform, or the first episode on the podcast, wherever you're consuming this, I talk about how I grew up in the church and what I witnessed. My dad was a pastor. My parents pastored people for 35 years. And because I was in that position of being a pastor's kid, I got to see my parents work. And the reality is that pastors are doctors, but for the soul. And when you are a doctor, people don't come to you unless they're sick, they got a broken limb. And so you get to see people going through the hardest things in their entire life. And one of the themes that continued to come through in everything I saw was the order of relationship. And wherever a man was not fulfilling his role, and he was acting weak and wasn't fulfilling his role as the leader as he should, there was always chaos, destruction, a lot of bitterness, a lot of sadness, a lot of tragic things took place. And I can think of a lot of them. And it's actually really interesting to look back and think about some of these things. A wife who openly disrespects and belittles her husband, a wife who is mouthy and aggressive like a man, a wife who orders her husband around, a man who fears his wife and either won't stand up to her or hides entirely, frequent arguments, lack of mutual respect, a wife who displays her body publicly. All of these signs, and every time I saw this as a kid, now when I look at those relationships that I identified when I was younger and went, you know what, there's some serious order issues there, I cannot think of a single instance right now where that marriage has not ended in divorce and some sort of tragic whatever. And people got really angry at my dad, actually. He was not a man who was afraid to tell it like it was. And a lot of people didn't like him for it. But I can remember on several occasions that my dad specifically went after a couple of men in the church he was leading going, look, dude, your wife is out of order. She is a problem, but she's not the ultimate problem. You are the problem because you're tolerating it, and what you tolerate will grow. What you accept, you can expect. What you allow will continue, and this is your problem. I even remember a couple of times that my dad actually got physical threats from one particular man. This man physically threatened my dad because my dad told him, you're being a weak man and your woman's out of order. Well, this guy threatened my dad and, left the church, all that, badmouthed my dad and my entire family to the town around us. Well, now 20 years later, come to find out, once both of his kids got out of the house, his wife abandoned him for her high school sweetheart who she'd been sleeping with for the past 30 years. Guys, that's no accident. And it's not just one instance. I can think about another instance where I identified an out-of-order relationship when I was younger. I was probably 15 years old when a new couple came into the church my parents were leading at the time. And I saw this guy's wife, and I was like, man, this broad is, this chick's mouthy. This guy's kind of quiet, doesn't really say much. She's clearly the vocal party here. And by the way, I'm not saying that a vocal woman is a problem. My mom's a vocal lady. My wife doesn't mind speaking her mind in the right way, in the right place, with the right attitude. But I identified that, man, this guy is weak. His wife is really running over him. And, well, years down the line, what happened? Well, one of their kids ended up gay. The other one's a transsexual. Another instance, a woman divorced her husband, left him with nothing. This is not just some sort of hyperbole or random idea. This is a pattern that's identifiable. Anyway, those are just some examples of an out-of-order marriage. Now, how an out-of-order marriage reflects a weak man is important to identify. And there's a few reasons for this that I'll address here in a minute. But number one, if you're taking notes, if you're not, maybe pause this, grab a pencil, mark this down. But how an out-of-order marriage reflects a weak man, first and foremost, it shows a failure to lead with strength. That's the very first thing. And that's really, the crux of it all, right? Is that if a man is meant to be the leader, he should be leading with strength. He should have vision. He should be casting and communicating that vision and leading his wife in that vision and on that mission very clearly. If he's got no strong vision, he's not leading with strength. If he's avoiding difficult conversations or decisions, he's leaving his wife to take charge. It also shows when you're not leading with strength and that inconsistent actions make it impossible for your wife to trust your leadership. Number two, it's a lack of commanding respect. A weak man doesn't earn respect through his actions, leading to a relationship dynamic where he is belittled and ignored. So an out-of-order marriage points to failure to lead with strength, and it points to a lack of commanding respect through action. I have said this for a number of years, but I'm a firm believer that if a man leads with enough strength and conviction, by the way, leading is setting the example, not just commanding, not just barking orders, it's setting an example through action. And so when men are not setting the standard, when they're not setting the tone, when they are not taking action to lead the way in a strong way, their wife is not going to respect them. But I've said for years that if a man will lead strongly enough and set the example strongly enough, he could have a woman who hates the desert and she will move to the Sahara Desert with him. If a man leads with enough strength, a woman could hate snow and move to Antarctica. Women were designed by God to be a help and a companion. They were not designed to be the leader in the relationship. That's not how God created it. It's not that women aren't capable. It's that that's outside of their design. It doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. What matters is God's design. And number 3, it shows that a man will allow chaos. And weak men enable or tolerate behaviors that lead to disorder. Remember how I said a couple minutes ago, what you tolerate will grow. You'll get more of it. What you accept, you can expect. You will get more of what you allow. And weak men who enable or tolerate behaviors that lead to disorder, this could look like a number of things. It could look like a woman who is out of order. It could also be reflected in children who are out of order because they see what's going on in the marriage. And now they are going to see that as their normal, and now they're going to be out of order as well. And I'm not talking about kids being rambunctious and doing a couple of stupid things growing up. I'm talking about children who are rebellious, kids who end up with, well, I'm not even going to go there. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole. But those are the top 3 things that I've noticed. Out of order marriage reflects that a weak man fails to lead with strength. He lacks commanding respect, and he allows chaos. Now, all of those things are very dangerous. Those are men, quite honestly, that you need to steer clear of. Those are dangerous individuals. Why? Because those type of men act like women. That role reversal becomes very, very dangerous when you take someone who is meant to be a helper, and now they've decided they are going to be the authoritative leader. And when you take the authoritative leader and make them act feminine, it creates a very, very dangerous situation. Men become emotionally driven, but with high testosterone, with an ability to wreak havoc, that can become a dangerous combination when men are driven by their emotions. Men will become vindictive. Guys, I'm telling you, out of order marriages and weak men have by far caused the most damage in my life and in many other lives that I have been around than anything else. Weak men, when they start to act like women, create absolute chaos and destruction. They get vindictive, they start gossiping, they become passive aggressive, won't ever tell you what's going on. They won't be honest with you and tell you to your face what's wrong. Man, I saw that over the course of 35 years growing up in the church, and it absolutely blew my mind how you could be on perfectly good terms with a man for 10 years, and yet all of a sudden the switch would flip. You know something's wrong, and you go, hey dude, like I've known you for a good 15 years now. You're not acting normal. Like what's going on? And they give you the, I'm fine. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Right? It's a man being a bitch. That's the reality. That's what it is. Men being emotional women. No, nothing's wrong. They won't be honest or real, and those type of men will stab you in the back. If they are not able to stand up to their wives, and therefore not able to stand up to their own children, what makes you think they'd be willing to tell you the truth to your face or stand up for you or on your behalf or defend you when your back is turned? Ain't gonna happen, man. That goes with it, that whole chaos. Now, here are some consequences of an out-of-order marriage. Pay attention to this. Increased conflict, resentment, and eventual collapse of trust and love. Guys, that's divorce. That's what it is. Women in their design need something specific. You know how people always talk, men need sex. Yeah, they need sex. It's a biological demand. It's a need. I like sex. I hope if you're a guy watching this that you like sex. Hopefully it's with women. And anyway, your wife needs you to be who you were meant to be because it will fulfill her needs. If you need sex and you're not getting it from your wife, that's going to lead you to an intense place of dissatisfaction and unhappiness. What about her needs? What about the protection she needs as the weaker sex? What about the leadership she needs with her design to be a helpmate and a companion? She was designed to be a helpmate and companion just like you were designed as a man to want and need sexual intercourse. Guys, it's no different. You're not giving each other what you need. And so it's going to lead to a breakdown in trust. It's going to lead to a lack of satisfaction in relationship, and it is a major precursor for divorce. And that's one of the primary, consequences here. Now, also, another consequence, high likelihood of infidelity or separation. Women want men. I don't care how boss babe you think your wife is and how alpha she may be with you. On the inside, because of her design, like it or not, she can't help it, and neither can you. She wants an alpha who can toss her around and who can take the lead, take the charge, speak with dad voice, and get the job done. It's in their design. They can't help it, neither can you. Number 3, children learn disrespect and rebellion instead of honor and discipline. And this out of order thing doesn't just affect you and your wife or a man and his wife. Kids see that. That becomes their normal. Now you've created a little weak version of yourself and your son, and a little out of order mouthy woman in your daughter who's going to grow up to make another man miserable, and you're raising a weak man who will hide from his wife too. I grew up, one of my friends growing up his parents had a very out of order dynamic. His dad was a very quiet guy, friendly guy, very nice. I liked him a lot. But his wife was clearly the one who wore the pants in the house. She bossed him around all day, nagged him constantly, was constantly up his back, bothering him all the time. And I would watch this guy. He's literally in his 50s or 60s when I met him. He would hide from his wife. He would go get in his truck and hide before he'd come in the house, or he'd go after work and go hang out as long as he could to avoid coming home to where his wife would then berate him, tell him what to do, insult him, boss him around, all that stuff. And it was really interesting because a couple of years down the line, I started to watch this happen in my friend. He watched his own dad behave this way, and so it became his normal. And now, as far as I know, to this day, his wife is telling him what to do. He's not the alpha in the relationship. By doing this with your wife, you are creating generational curses that are going to have to be broken. It is really hard to break people out of their normal. And when their normal is abnormal and dysfunctional, it's going to take a whole lot of fixing to get it corrected. So that shows generational impact. Sons grow up without strong male role models, and daughters end up to be promiscuous, out of order chicken heads. I don't know what to tell you. It erodes confidence and self-esteem. And it also prevents a man from growing into his full potential as a leader in his home and in his community. Now, here are some signs you may be allowing an out of order marriage. Be looking for these. Your wife frequently disrespects or belittles you. In public, that's a major, major red flag, dude. Your wife does that in public, you need to get this under control immediately. But they also do it in private. If that is happening, you probably have an out-of-order marriage that you need to fix. By the way, yes, it is on you as the man. You are the leader. You are the responsible party. Number 2, you may avoid difficult conversations to keep the peace. It's not about keeping the peace. It's because you are being a pussy. You are afraid. You are not willing to step up, nut up, set your junk on the table, and do what needs done. 3, your wife feels the need to lead in major decisions because you won't. Guys, this may be one of the biggest things in weak men is the inability to make a strong decision. It's the inability to be able to make decisions for yourself without asking for and receiving permission from someone else. If you are constantly looking for someone else to give you the step-by-step instructions for life and tell you what is okay and tell you what your vision is and tell you where you are going in life, you are not the one in charge of your life. You are not the one leading. You are not fulfilling your role. You have stepped off the throne of your life. Another one, your children openly rebel without consequences. If they see your wife do it, they're going to do it too. And by the way, this goes the other way too. It's not just about your wife being out of order with, being disrespectful to you. Your kids are also going to reflect what you do, whether it be because you're overbearing, another sign of being a weak man, or it's because you're being a coward. Either way, it's not going to be healthy for anybody. And then finally, your family lacks a clear vision or direction. I talked a little bit about that with you needing someone else to tell you where you are going. So if any of those things are in your life, on a regular basis, you need to take a look at it. And there's one other thing that I'm going to lay out here that I have noticed a lot online that bothers me in a big way. And it is this trend of men displaying their wives' bodies on the internet. If your wife is on the internet in a bikini, she ain't your wife. She's our wife. That's the way I see it, man. There are far too many men, and namely some coaches who I'm not going to name. There are some big men's coaches right now, probably a couple of the biggest in the game right now. When I look online, they are regularly displaying their woman's half-naked, if not 90% naked body on the internet. As if it's like, look at the kind of wife I can get. You are whoring out your wife on the internet for likes. You are being a cuck. And that's not just about you showing those pictures. What is your wife putting of herself on the internet? Is she being an attention whore? Are you allowing it? Are you tolerating it? If there's one thing that I can identify to know if a woman is available to step out on her husband, it's if she's displaying herself on the internet with an open profile where I can see 95% of her body. It is disgusting, it's sick, it's wrong, and you are undermining yourself. Just to get that out there. Now, how to take leadership back in your marriage. Guys, and by the way, this talk is not comprehensive. We could keep going for days, but I can't make this video endless or this podcast endless, however you're consuming this. Number one is own your role. How to take back your leadership in your marriage. Number one, own your role. You got to acknowledge where you failed to lead. Take responsibility. That's the only way to have agency and take control of any situation is to assume it's 100% your responsibility, even if it's not your fault. It's your responsibility. Let's leave the word fault out of it. It's your responsibility. You are the leader. You must take ownership of the situation. You must understand, recognize, and admit, I have allowed this. I have tolerated it. I have stepped out of my role. Even if it was comfortable for me to do, I stepped out of the role God gave me. And I allowed myself to fall out of order. And so I allowed my wife to fulfill the role I should have been fulfilling. And now she's out of order and it's creating chaos in our relationship. Responsibility is always the first step to change. Every single time, without fail, it is an unbending principle. Number two, communicate with vision. Share a clear vision for your marriage and your family with your spouse. Get aligned on your goals and values. I saw a really interesting clip today online of a really big name coach and billionaire business owner who was asked the question, can you and your wife stay married if you voted for two different people in this past election? And his answer, of course, was immediately, absolutely. But then you go and flip over and look at his wife, and she's one of these chicks with shaved, the shaved side of her head, talking about weird sexual stuff on her podcast with other women. That is an out-of-order marriage, very, very clearly. But the bottom line is, the reason it's so out of order is because they're completely separate on their values and morals. To be clear, I'm not much of a politics individual. I don't think there's any hope for politics. I think politics is just a game for the uninformed and the unintelligent for the most part. I don't really buy into politics. I don't think it's an ultimate solution. So this for me is not about Democrat, Republican. I do think if you do align yourself with a Democratic Party, I think if you do vote for the Democratic Party, whether I think voting works or not, I think you're a lunatic. I think you're dangerous. I think you are immoral. And I think you have your head so far up your rear end you cannot see the light of day. But the bottom line is, if you can go and vote for the Republican nominee this year and your wife can go vote for the Democrat nominee this year, there is such a chasm of values that it is incompatible, guys. It's completely incompatible. This is not the old parties of the past where it's like, oh, we want to decide how much money to, apply to some sort of public benefit. We're talking about one party's got hookers, strippers, and abortion clinics on site at their convention, and the other is talking about conservatism, whole families, and the complete family structure, and God. There is no bigger chasm than that. You must get on the same page with your values. A house divided itself against itself cannot stand. The scripture said it very, very clearly. You divide a house in half, it won't stand. You divide an army in half with separate values, they're not going to fight together. You must be on the same page with your spouse in your values and your morals. Without that, your foundation is gone. Your marriage is doomed. Get it fixed. So communicate with vision and get on the same course. Get your values and morals together. Make sure you communicate your vision clearly to your woman so she can follow you confidently, knowing that you're actually taking her somewhere worth going. I said this a while ago, but no woman wants to get on a ride for the next 40 years to go to nowhere. Make sure she knows she's going somewhere. She wants an adventure too. Number 3, lead by example. Earn respect through consistency, discipline, and integrity. And demonstrate strength by making tough decisions with wisdom and with love. Number 4, set boundaries. Establish and enforce healthy boundaries in your marriage and in your family. This is not about bossing your wife around and telling her what to do. It's about coming to her with a sense of vision and a sense of leadership to say, we need boundaries in our marriage to ensure that we are the happiest, healthiest, most God-aligned couple that we can be. And then finally, develop spiritual leadership. Take ownership of your family's spiritual growth rather than outsourcing it. This really should be number 1 because it's the core of everything. I didn't really put these in order of priority. These are just 5 ways you can take back leadership in your marriage. But probably the biggest, I won't say probably, the biggest issue in the world today is that men have abdicated their responsibility and role for being the spiritual leader for their own lives first, and that in the lives of their family members. Guys, your priest and your pastor, priest or pastor, rabbi, whatever, is not meant to speak to God for you and tell you what God has to say. I'm not saying you can't hear from God through other people. I've heard God say things to me through other people before plenty of times. That's not the point. The point is your relationship with God is your relationship with God alone. If you are letting anyone else be your priest or pastor, your go-between between you and God, you are not hearing from God, you do not lead your spiritual life, and that is going to destroy everything you stand on. If you are not the leader in your spiritual life, and you're abdicating that role to someone else, you are on a dangerous, dangerous path. Take ownership of that spiritual walk. Learn to lead. A strong man leads with love, with wisdom, and unwavering vision. Don't let weakness define your marriage. Step up, take control, and become the leader that your family deserves. Guys, I hope this helps you. The number 1 sign of a weak man, don't allow it in your own life. Be exceedingly aware and wary of men who do have these signs in their life. Be careful how much access you give them to your life. You want to surround yourself with strong men that are going to force you higher and make you more. If you like this episode, share it, like it, comment, send it to a friend, and I'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for being here.